As Xbox tries to close its largest acquisition ever, there are two key dates coming up on the horizon. Nearly every week, and sometimes multiple times per week, people are dropping into my DMs on the Twitter asking, when are we going to get more information about Microsoft trying to close that $70 billion transaction to close that Activision acquisition, which is still hard to say even though we're coming up on that year of knowing that it was going to happen. So to set some ground coverage here. So back on January 18th of 2022, so that's, it'll be a year in January, Microsoft said, we're going to spend $70 billion dues, and we're going to go out and buy Activision and Call of Duty and their mobile platform and everything else. And so that really sparked a fire in the industry from both camps. Microsoft's side, they're like, hey, let's try to get this through the regulatory hurdles as fast as we can. And then on basically every other camp, mainly Sony, saying, we got to figure out how to stop this. So let's just dive into two important dates that are on the horizon, because they're going to give us hopefully some more information about when this might close. But before we do that, Bloomberg recently sat down with Satya Nadella, and he actually said, hey, I'm still pretty darn confident. He said, we are confident because we are number 4 or number 5 in the industry, depending on how you measure us, which is pretty interesting because I've always pretty much considered them number 3, right? You have Sony, you have Nintendo, but if you broaden the horizon, and some of this is under that acquisition umbrella that we will get here, or, after spending $70 billion, is the mobile segment. And if you include mobile and you include things like Tencent and other companies, that puts Microsoft somewhere in the 4 or maybe 5, depending on how you measure it, which is, just really setting themselves up even better, in their opinion, of course, for success for closing this, because once you include mobile, which you cannot ignore anymore because it is a massive market, Microsoft is actually pretty far down on that tier list. So let's dive into the couple dates that are coming up here. First important date is likely October 25th, or it could potentially be October 26th. A reason I say this is Microsoft earnings always happen typically that week of the year for the latest quarter. Now, Microsoft hasn't officially announced the date of their earnings, but it's going to be the 25th or the 26th. And this is the proper time for Microsoft to share more information about the acquisition. And you can bet that it's going to be a topic of discussion. It has to be, and it has ongoing been a topic during their earnings. And as we approach this time of the year, we should be starting to get a little bit more solidified about when we're going to get more information. And so hopefully Microsoft will share that, because this is a very much a material event. And so what does material mean? Meaning it is so much money that it actually impacts shareholders. And so shareholders need to be aware of it. And Microsoft can't try to just shove this under something called like more personal computing, like they do a lot of their other stuff. And so October 25th or 26th is the first date where we might hear some more information, hopefully, about what is going on, or at least to get more firm timelines. Now remember, Microsoft has said since the beginning they do not expect this acquisition to close until June of 2023. So that is next year, and more than likely June 30th, because that is the last day of Microsoft's fiscal year. And so there's still some good runway ahead of us before Microsoft can close that deal, or when they expect to close it. That's as long as there's not any regulatory hurdles. And honestly, at this point, I think Microsoft is probably willing to throw just about any concession out there to be able to close this deal. It is such a monumental thing, and the way Microsoft is posturing themselves about this deal really makes it seem like, look, we'll do whatever it takes. We don't care about exclusivity on our own platforms. We'll just make it broad and open. We'll take the Minecraft route. That is what they have been purveying to the industry about how they want to use these, or the IP that they will acquire. So that's the first major one. The next one is November 8th. The EU Commission, I should say, has issued a document that basically says, look, we will rule on this, at least based on what they've given us so far, by November 8th. So realistically, it could come today, but more than likely, knowing how government agencies works, I bet it's November 8th, or possibly the 7th, when Microsoft will learn more about the stance in the EU. Because remember, there's a couple key segments that have to sign off on this. There's the US, there's the EU, of course the UK is working through this as well, and China also throws in hurdles as well. So Microsoft has a lot of different places where they've got to be going on, and we also know about Brazil. That's where a lot of information has come out as well. And so there's a ton of different regulatory agencies all across the globe looking at this, but realistically, if they can get signed off in the US and in the EU, then they stand a very good chance of actually closing this deal. And based on what Satya keeps saying, it is actually going to happen. The one outstanding that we don't have a date on yet is the US. Now, I would expect actually here that we learn more. We got some information around the June timeframe. It's like, hey, they kept asking for extensions, and so they've been granted as they continue to probe into this. And I fully expect that Microsoft is completely aware of their current status, and that's why Satya keeps saying, we think we're going to be able to get this through, and that they're probably just walking in open arms like, what concessions do we need to make them in the US to close this deal? And so there you go. So keep in mind October 25th-ish and November 8th. Those are the next key dates by at which point we will learn more. And then hopefully around that time, we will learn more about what the US plans to do. The other one that is a little bit further out is obviously that January date, the 18th. That will be 1 year after the acquisition was announced, and typically things are pretty well known at that point from all regulatory bodies, because they don't want to hold these things up forever, because then there's other issues about valuations and other things come into play. So by January 18th, we should have pretty good feelings about across the board about what is going to happen here. All that being said, keep your eyes peeled for November 8th. The EU Commission, I think, is the first major entity that is going to issue a statement on this. Obviously, the UK is looking into it, but I consider the EU superseding the UK in this regard. So that's what we got. That is where we're at on the latest on this acquisition. Now, when somebody pings me and says, what's the latest? I at least have a video to point them to. And if you want to stay updated on everything that's happening in the world of Xbox, Microsoft, and beyond, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.